Hi, everybody. Good evening, and hello to all of you joining us from all over the world. This evening, I'm going to introduce a brand new idea, brand new concept to all of you. And I'm going to thank you for joining me. We're going to spend the next couple of days together in a idea that downloaded into my head, one of those blasts that kind of took off, and I've been running with it ever since. But I think the way heaven talks to me is I can be in an ordinary place, and then all of a sudden an illumination happens. And it really was a second of illumination. But in keeping with how those events happen, those mystical events happen, they're years in the making. It requires years of inner preparation. So what I'd like to share with you this evening is the significance of what I think is happening and why I'm teaching what I'm teaching this week. We're going to explore Breathe Together, how healing yourself heals the planet. And that just sounds like, okay, but it's not. Because what the core of it is about is what for me has been the missing link in healing. And I think that I might be on the verge of figuring that out. That's number one. Number two, I think, I'll just set the groundwork here. I think that I had to finish this book on prayer that I've been writing before I could even begin to get to this level of work on what is the birth for me of bio-spiritual ecology. What I've realized is that ordinary religion is evaporating. And while you can say on one hand, that's obvious, what's really needs to be explored is why that's happening. Not just why that's happening, but what the significance is for you and how that's affecting world events. And how world events are in turn affecting your health. And so that's the cycle that we're looking at here. And so what I realized is that our personal anatomy breathes with the anatomical system of the global village. And that's what I'm going to spell out here in the next couple of days with you. But it not just from a theoretical point of view, but the missing link is that we need to figure out and explore your specific connection to the anatomy of the whole. How are you as an individual? How's your micro earth connected to the macro earth? How does that create an epidemic? How do epidemics happen? Why do they happen when they do? We are now living in a moment of an epidemic. My work actually got launched with AIDS. In a funny way. And it was during that time when I was doing readings on people that I did my first reading on a young man who had AIDS. And that, I'll never forget that particular reading. But after I did that reading, I thought, I was so new at this business of medical intuition and doing readings. I was such a novice. And and I'll go into a little bit more detail on this tomorrow, not this evening, but the whole idea of doing readings and all of that and how that figures into this. It never occurred to me ever. I never even thought about epidemics. I never thought about any of this until I started to do readings, and then I thought, what causes an epidemic? Where do they come from? And then I thought about polio and how polio, and I'm just going to hit a pause button. And I want to plant a thought about you, because this is how I want you to strategize as we go ahead in these next days. That everything that happens in your life, everything that happens, is interconnected. That how you feel, what you're thinking, all of your relationships, even if your relationships don't know each other, the quality of everything in your life is speaking to each other. It doesn't matter that people don't know each other. Energetically, everything is connected in your life in any given moment. So that no matter what event is occurring, it's made up of the same substance of that moment because it's in that moment. Are you with me? It can't be separated because that's the whole of that moment. So everything connected, everything is connected because it's all part of that moment. That you can't see the connection doesn't change a thing. That you think this person has nothing to do with that person in your life because they don't know each other. They're still connected on the fabric of you. And the quality of all the events in any moment of your life are breathing together. So one of the themes that has to download and you have to get is that everything in your life is breathing together. Even if you try by personality, by will, to separate things, I don't want to tell this person this and I don't want to talk about, that event is breathing in you and with you, and therefore it's impossible for you to separate the breath of events from everything around you. Because it's the same oxygen. You are oxygenating it with the same breath. Are you with me here? Yes. Secondly, if that is so for you as an individual, the same is true on a larger level where we are creating this workshop together. So now we're just going to up it a little bit. And we're collectively creating the quality of this workshop. We're breathing together now in this. Got it? Okay. So now let's take it to the next big, huge next level, which is the collective society. One of the exercises we're going to do is to figure out what events you're connected to and how you calculate that. Because those events that you are co-creating in the world atmosphere are also co-creating you. You've got to stop dwelling in the illusion that you're separate from anything in this world, because you're not. You are totally interconnected. Totally interconnected. And the energetic threads that interconnect you are your archetypal patterns. They're archetypal patterns. These are your electric circuits that connect you to the events that you are co-creating. Now, the first time I realized this was with polio. So if you look at the event of polio, 1929, the stock market crashes in the US, on Wall Street. And language is our primary tool through which we shape our reality. And if you read how it was reported, it was described that following polio, and of course we had the Dust Bowl and the economy crashed, the way we said, how we described ourselves was we were economically crippled. Crippled. We imaged it, we felt it, we saw it, we breathed it together. And that is our collective immune system. And out of it came a virus, polio. And we saw this, we experienced it so much so in the US that we elected a president who had the virus. Of course, in those days, we didn't have the media, and most Americans did not know Roosevelt had polio. And they were much more respectful of the White House than they are now, where they expose everything. But then he was able to keep the dignity of his illness to himself. And yet, and this is the tribe, the way tribes recover from feeling weak and wounded has always been to go to battle, to go to war. So the U.S. joins the war. Now, mind you, and this is what I'll show you to navigate this over the next few days. When you think in terms of your archetypal patterns, they are unconscious, and they are mystical, and they are symbolic. So nobody sat around the Situation Room in the White House, which they didn't even have then, but the War Room, and said, look, we have to go to war to deal with the archetypal pattern here. Nobody thinks that way. One day they will. I suspect one day, sometime in the future, Churchill had actually a little bit of this. But one day in the future, when people are wise enough to get the power of the unconscious and the power of the psychic field, they'll have on staff someone like me who navigates the celestial archetypal power realm as the first order of business. Because instinctively, we do the power dance instinctively. Our instincts compensate for what we will not do consciously. That's what our instincts are all about. So we instinctually will go to battle to replenish our strength. And that's exactly what we did. We get back into the war field. And after World War II, the language shifted, and we said we were economically on our feet again. And by the 1950s, Jonas Salk, we were in a position where psychically enough people in the collective, the balance had shifted. And the inspiration, the vibration was such that the inspiration for polio could come through, for the vaccine. Then comes AIDS. AIDS was a virus of a totally different construct, a totally different pattern, a collective pattern that by the time AIDS came along, it had the pattern of, it had the pattern that fit victim consciousness. It was drawn to people who shared, by the time AIDS came along, we'd become a psycho-spiritual society. We'd become a people who excavated the territory behind our eyes. we'd become a society that was very much aware of the wounded child. We changed our complexion enormously. We'd also become aware of victim consciousness in a way that did not exist decades earlier. And if you look at the profile of the people where the AIDS virus exploded, it was in people who tended toward victim identification. Prostitutes, the gay population before they could speak out, people who were drug abusers, heroin users. So there were people within the society who saw themselves as powerless or victimized. If you look at the profile of what AIDS did, it breaks down the lungs, it breaks down the blood system. Now, cast your attention to the earth. It's the disease of the victimization of the environment. The breakdown of the lungs of the earth, the environmental system, the water system, and the ozone is the immune system of the earth. So there's a parallel between the awakening of environmentalism and the awakening of AIDS. Are you with me here? Okay, micro, macro. Now we're having another epidemic. And this one has a different configuration entirely. Very different, at a very different time, and again, a very different feel to it. The other ones didn't see people scrambling. This one, the Louvre is closing, Disney World's closing, meetings are ending, the borders are being shut. I mean, this one has a hysteria to it, unlike anything I've ever seen, that any of us has ever seen. And I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure what's going on yet. I can't get it's too soon for me to call it on this one. But this one it's as if it's become the magnet for all the psychic free radicals of hostility and mistrust. It's like gathering the storm to itself. So, at any rate, I'm going to leave that thought there. We're going to revisit that, but not tonight. But this is part of what I'm saying, is that in these years of healing, in these years of consciousness since entering the nuclear age, the template that has been laid in these last 70 years has been all about us learning very different calculations about understanding ourselves, about understanding how we work, about understanding our psychic spiritual nature, about trying to figure out how our health works, how we work, how the power of our thoughts, the power of our emotions. We've been on this deep dive study of how we function, of redefining everything about us. Not redefining, defining anew everything about us in completely different territory. And what I think is happening now is that this critical turning point with the climate change, with the eruption of illnesses, is that we have spent 70-some years learning but not applying. We've spent 70 years actually not making the transition of almost not applying the technology, the personal spiritual technology that we now have to apply, which is this. The theme that's dropped into all of us is that is holism. Agreed? But we don't live it. But we don't live it. Nobody lives it. And the fact is we have to start living it. And what does that mean? What does it actually mean to engage the laws of holism and actually live it? To participate beyond recycling. What does it actually mean? Now, my personal mystery, when I have dealt now for 35 years with healing, health and healing, is that I have worked with people and wondered, why are you not healing? I wrote a book on it. And beyond that book, I've wondered for years and years and years, why aren't we healthier? Why are we more fragile than our elders? Why? What do you need? Why are we more fragile? Why do we have less stamina? Why are we more hypersensitive? Why do we spend years and years and years trying to forgive someone? Why can't we get over things? We are, in fact, far more fragile than people who lived before the nuclear age, who got on with their lives. We are brought down when someone does this. And you can't get over that. Much less heal cancer. You can't get over someone doing and walking by you. How could you do that to me? How could you do that to me? How could you say that? You can't get over a tone of voice someone uses. You can't use that tone. You can use this tone, but not that one. Do you understand? The delicateness. I think there's been a whole reason for that. We'll get to that, and that's the power of learning the significance and the power of your words, and how powerful everything about you really is. And it's been put on hyperdrive. But unless you actually, I'll explain this more tomorrow in micro detail, but I think the law of we create our reality has changed us. But the way we learn that is we learn it through becoming very hyper to our words. To our words. To, oh my God, this one word, I can't get over it. Until we get to the stage where we're at now, which is we now have to use that power and direct it outside of ourselves. Instead of constantly focusing on ourselves, to heal ourselves, to process, we have to, that's enough now. We have to now utilize this power that we have to connect to the whole and redirect our energy. This is the great turning point, I think, that we're living. And this, when I've looked at people like, why aren't you healing? What I realize is the missing piece for us is this. We don't actually have a template, an icon, an archetype of a healthy person that we want to follow. Our idea of being healthy is somebody who's Herculean, somebody who's big and strong and healthy and independent and invincible. We have a myth in our heads of what a fully healthy person is. And that fully healthy person is not somebody we want to be. Because that person is the person who then has to take care of everybody else, and we don't want to be that person. And we don't want to be the person who can't ask for help. We want to be the person who gets to ask for help. So nobody wants to be fully healthy. We have a completely unrealistic idea of what it is to be a healthy person. We have this idea that healing means we get someplace and everything is fully healed and we're done. We have a completely unrealistic idea. We have no functioning archetype that says you can be healed and healing simultaneously. We don't get that. We don't get that. And likewise, and that allows us to continually stay in ourselves and not take this next step, which is that in order to be really a healthy person, you get into yourself, you get to know your anatomy, you get to understand that you, in fact, are in charge of your reality, which I'm going to explain from a mystical point of view in depth in the next day. But the next step is, and now that I understand how I work with the laws of the universe and my health, I now have to connect to the whole. Because the real object of you becoming a whole person and healing is not for yourself, but for everybody else. And that's where people are dropping the ball. Because the truth is, what is in one is in the whole. So long as you are disconnected from the whole, you'll never heal. Because you'll never get that your health, 50, 60, 70% of your health is contributed by the breath of everybody else. By everybody else, by the vibrational field of the rest of life. The idea that you think you're responsible for your health by yourself is one of the greatest illusions you're under. And the idea that you can pull back and just dwell in a little narcissistic bubble and just heal yourself and just cling to yourself, that's exactly why you'll never get out alive. You'll never get out alive anyway, but you'll never, ever, you'll only progress so far. Your immune system will only progress so far. You'll only get so far. You will dwell in depression. You'll dwell in it. The weight of it, you won't be able to break out. You won't be able to break out. These are collective disorders. They're not individual. The epidemics of depression, the epidemics of immune disorders, these are brand new contemporary collective epidemics. I stopped doing readings because the more I understood the relationship between the micro and the macro, the more I realized I cannot communicate with one person anymore who has the mentality of just tell me, just give me the one reason why I'm sick, when in fact, I'm looking at you as a micro of a global village. And you still are doing basic Newtonian mathematics. For every one reason, give me one solution for one problem. And you don't work that way. You don't work that way. You've become a hologram. You are interconnected to the whole of life, and you don't get it. And that's why you're sick, is that you don't get your own wiring. And you insist on thinking of yourself in primal terms, and you're not. And it's like somebody who insists on thinking things are white and black, left and right, up and down, winner, loser, in this polarity thought, and you'll never get out of a problem when you think that way, because the world is not that way. Your mind may be, but the rest of the world isn't. Do you get it now? I've got to get you into the hologram. And it's the hologram where you will begin to understand how you are actually functioning. How your immune system, most people don't realize that they're operating back here too. They only see the front of themselves. Most people think they actually have a past. You don't. You simply have simultaneity. There is no past. Where's the past? It's in your mind, but the energy is only here. There's no such thing as past energy. Energy does not have history. Your mind has history, but your system only has now. I've got to recalibrate you. And you have to understand that you are breathing with all life. You are one with all things. And what does that mean? And as you understand what it means to relate to an archetypal pattern, that your archetypes connect you to events in the world. And you are co-creating those events. And those events are feeding into your immune system. And that's where we're going with this workshop. All life breathes together. And I cannot tell you how much I think this is that route of empowerment, that we need each other. We need each other because you finally realize, my God, you have an internet that functions just like the internet. And you can't unplug yourself from that internet. You may not want to think of yourself as connected to everybody, but it's too bad. Because that's the way it is. And that you have a choice. You either pour grace into it, or you don't. But it serves all of us to pour grace into everybody. Because we are all breathing together. And until we get that, until we actually really get that, we're never getting out of anything.